Good afternoon. Getting right down to business here. We're doing it live and doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. Mottek On Money, live on the air, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, YouTube, all your favorite podcast platforms. A ray of sunshine on Wall Street, but still nervous time on Main Street with uncertainty over tariffs and supply chains in focus. The big news for investors wrapping up the week, the broadly based S&P 500 has just racked up its longest winning streak in more than 20 years and has now erased all of the post-so-called Liberation Day losses. That was the day President Trump rolled out his tariff plans against America's trading partners a month ago, sparking a wild, volatile market ride last month with big moves both up and down, mostly up lately. Stocks wrapping up the week with a rally today following the release of a solid April jobs report and signs of easing trade tensions between the United States and China. The Dow came in for a closing gain of 564 points, the S&P 500 of 82, and the NASDAQ jumped 267 points. The market got a boost today after the big enchilada. The monthly economic reports came out. That's the jobs report, coming in better than expected, indicating labor resiliency despite a stock market shock in April over tariff uncertainty and economic uncertainty overall. Also, China evaluating U.S. officials' recent overtures on trade talks to assess how serious the Trump administration is about a shift in policy stance. China's Commerce Ministry said, in quoting them, "Door is open if the U.S. agrees to pull back on reciprocal tariffs." The comments helping ease concerns the tariffs will stoke an economic slowdown. We did get some news from Apple and Amazon on earnings, and looks like Apple pulled back today nearly $8 at $205 and change for the week. The Dow did gain 3%. The S&P 500 almost 3%, and the NASDAQ jumped nearly 3.5%. Gold, which hit a record high last month above $3,500, is back to around $3,200 an ounce. Crypto's roaring back with Bitcoin back up around 97,000. We're heading into another big week with Berkshire Hathaway shareholders meeting set for tomorrow with 94-year-old investment legend Warren Buffett presiding over that. The Milken Institute Global Conference getting underway this weekend in Beverly Hills. And the Federal Reserve will wrap up a policy-setting meeting next week with a decision on interest rates, a statement on the economy, and a full-blown news conference by Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. Joining us live now, a giant in the world of economics, education, business, finance, and philanthropy and financial media, most notably this program over many years, and we're very grateful for that. With us now, Dr. Mohamed EL-ERIAN, the president of Queen's College, Cambridge, his alma mater, one of the world's most prominent schools for the study of economics. He's also chief economic advisor at Allianz, former head of PIMCO in Newport Beach. And if you've been reading the papers lately, he's also a candidate for chancellor at Cambridge University. His many honors include his most recent, the highest possible honor, from the GABA organization here in Southern California. That's the German American Business Association of Southern California. Mohamed, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank, and good afternoon.
Elated to have you with us, and certainly a lot to take in. It's been a while since we chatted behind live microphones. Give us your assessment of things here following today's jobs report and the latest news on tariffs of China, the economy, and the whole works.
We'll start with today's jobs report. It was a really good jobs report. It beat in terms of job creation, 177,000. The unemployment rate did not go up. Labor force participation increased. So when you look from the demand and the supply of labor, it is a really positive report. Now, it's important because it indicates that the U.S. economy has momentum going into a really uncertain period where we know already that certain businesses are on the sideline waiting to see how the tariff situations evolve. We know that the port of LA and Long Beach have significant reductions in terms of shipments coming. And we know that people are worried about both lower growth and higher inflation. So it was really good news to see that the economy has momentum and therefore has resilience going into this period of high uncertainty.
Given the recent market volatility and back and forth on tariffs, a lot of discussion, a lot of recession talk recently. Some say we may already be in a recession. What is your assessment of the recession question this year?
So we got the GDP number for the first quarter, and it shows a contraction of 0.3. Now, that was mainly due to people accelerating the imports of various things ahead of tariffs. So if you look at the underlying, if you like, the not so volatile components, we're talking about consumption, we're talking about business investment, residential investment, they were growing at 2%. So the overall figure shows that we contracted, but the underlying figure, the one that economists focus on most, show that the economy slowed, but is still going at an adequate speed. The worry is going forward. And what economists call soft data, the sentiment data, how people feel about spending money, how businesses feel about investing, that sentiment data has fallen off a cliff. And the worry is that poor sentiment will lead to a significant slowdown in the economy. So that is what we're looking at. But so far, the so-called soft data hasn't translated into what economists call the hard data.
On your live with Dr. Mohamed EL-ERIAN, and we had the director of the Port of Long Beach on this program 24 hours ago, and he indicated that the slowdown at the Port of Long Beach might be even worse than the COVID days when the whole world economy was shut down. What is your prediction here on how the trade battle between the U.S. and China will play out? And obviously new worries about the supply chain and the cost of just about everything in the face of all that.
Yeah, and I was on set today with Bloomberg with the executive director of the LA port, Gene Sirocco, and he had the same message. He didn't make the comparison to COVID, but he said that things have slowed down significantly. And the other point he made is that even if the tariff issues gets resolved tomorrow and we resume operations as normal, it will take a month to reposition the ships and everything else. So, we are looking at a slowdown that has started, and that slowdown will likely continue for a minimum of 4 weeks if there is immediate resolution of the tariff issue. But it's unlikely to see an immediate resolution of the tariff issue.
What's your reaction to what happened last month with the wild gyrations following President Trump's announcement on tariffs on what he called Liberation Day and this wild ride we've seen? And now I have to say a very impressive bounce back, recovering all of the losses from the past month.
Oh, it's been an incredible bounce back. We are back at where we were before. We've had the longest winning streak, 9 straight days in over 20 years, as you mentioned at the beginning. And if you look at the stock market, to some extent, if you look at the functioning of the bond market, they're back to, quote, where they were before Liberation Day. What is not is the value of the dollar. And today, we again saw this unusual situations where the yields on dollar assets, so how much you get paid for holding a dollar asset, that yield went up, but the dollar value weakened. That is a really unusual correlation, and it's one that's raising a lot of eyebrows.
On the air live with Dr. Mohamed EL-ERIAN. It's been described as America's Brexit, and one write-up I see in The Guardian, the president's historic gamble on tariffs has been compared to basically a declaration of economic independence, similar to what we saw with the UK in Brexit. Would you draw that comparison as well?
I would not. Brexit was a complete rupture of a trade treaty, if you like, between the United Kingdom and the European Union, and it was replaced by nothing at all. What is happening in the U.S. is very different. The U.S. is seeking to be treated fairly by its trading partners, and that is both tariffs, the excess charge an American product has going to other countries, and non-tariffs, the barriers that stop the U.S. from competing in other countries' markets. There's also desire by the administration to do 2 other things with tariff policy. One is to raise revenue in order to lower income taxes, and the other one is to encourage a reshoring, bringing back manufacturing industry to the U.S. So 3 objectives: fair trade, revenue generation, and reshoring of manufacturing. And in the period ahead, we're going to see the first one suggests that you escalate to de-escalate. The other 2 suggest you escalate and you keep it there to raise revenue and to attract industry back. So we're going to have to see which way it goes. It's not clear yet where we're going to end up on tariffs, and therefore it is not clear whether we simply have better trading relations or there is a significant change in trading relations.
That is very interesting. Thank you for that thoughtful analysis, as always. And Federal Reserve is set to meet in the week ahead with a decision on interest rates, statement on the economy, and then Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, who recently has been locking horns with President Trump. President Trump last month said that he would not be firing the Fed chairman, and that drama played out, and that also helped the market rally over the last month or so. What are we expecting from the Federal Reserve next week, and what are your thoughts about this recent locking of horns between the Fed chairman and the president?
So I think that the president will be frustrated. He would like to see the Fed cut interest rates. It is unlikely that the Fed will cut interest rates, and today's jobs report makes it very difficult for the Fed to cut interest rates. So I think that what the Fed really wants to do is to have its meeting and have the press conference for Chair Powell and not make any news. Just leave things as highly unlikely, but I think that is what the desire is going to be. The relationship between President Trump and Chair Powell was bad during President Trump's first term. So this is not new. It has been clear for a while that President Trump doesn't think much of Chair Powell. He has noted that Chair Powell has been late and has been wrong. That's the sentence he used, and he is referring to how the Fed missed completely the surge in inflation in 2021. That saw inflation go all the way up to 9% in 2022, and then necessitated a very hard reaction, raising interest rates by 5 full percentage points. So there has been frustration for a while in the White House. But the good news for those who worry about Fed independence is that the president said that he doesn't intend to fire Powell. Powell's term ends in May of next year. So by September, October, we should know who the president is nominating to be the next chair.
Want to get your reaction to the record run-up in the price of gold this year, above $3,500 an ounce, right now hovering at around $3,200 an ounce. So what's your reaction to that big news this year?
It relates to what we talked about earlier, the dollar. Certain central banks around the world would like to diversify away from the dollar. They're very highly exposed to the dollar. It's not easy to find another currency that dominates the dollar. So at the margin, they are buying gold, and they've been buying gold consistently. So during this run-up that started last year and continued this year, which has been remarkable, gold has broken every historical correlation. In the old days, it was a risk-off asset. Now it's both a risk-off asset and a risk-on asset. In the old days, it had a relationship with the dollar. Now it goes up whether the dollar is strong or weak. And it just reflects the consistent buying foreign central bank as they try to diversify at the margin the reserves holding.
And what about so-called digital gold? It's been we spoke at the advent of the crypto era when Bitcoin first came up, and you shared with us your initial dabblings in Bitcoin early on, and now it's hovering close to $100,000 here once again after hitting a record high earlier this year. What are your thoughts about how crypto has evolved, and your thoughts specifically about Bitcoin's performance this year?
So both are maturing. They are starting to attract more stable institutional holdings. The Trump administration is much more favorably disposed to crypto than the Biden administration, so that has helped. So you're seeing institutional adoption. It's a very gradual process, and that's how it starts. It's gradual as people try to understand that better, but it remains a very volatile asset, and it will remain so because you have a lot of speculators that also dabble in Bitcoin. But the story is greater adoption over time. That is a consistent theme that I think will continue.
On the air live with Dr. Mohamed EL-ERIAN, and any thoughts about the recent bond market performance, which seemed to have gotten the Trump administration's attention last month and put that 90-day pause on tariffs with some of our trading partners, and the performance of the credit markets, and any canaries in the coal mine that you see out there?
Yeah, the week following Liberation Day, we had two instances of near market malfunction. There's a big difference between volatile markets and market malfunction. And the difference is in volatile markets, you can do what you want to do. You may not like the price. You may not like the bid-offer spread that you're being charged, but you can do what you're trying to do. In malfunctioning markets, you cannot do what you want to do because the market isn't functioning well. And therefore, you end up doing something else that spreads contagion, that spreads contamination to other markets. And when policymakers see us get near the line that separates volatility from malfunction, they worry a great deal. And that's what happened on that Tuesday in the week following Liberation Day. And it happened again on the Friday. So on the Tuesday, we avoided malfunction by the Trump administration announcing the 90-day suspension. And on the Friday, we avoided malfunction by the Federal Reserve making it very clear that they would intervene to ensure the smooth functioning of markets. I think the risk of malfunction has come down quite a bit, but it was a scary moment and one that certainly got the attention of the White House.
You've seen tremendous volatility this year as well. Are you expecting to see more volatility this year? And let me ask you the big question here, Mohamed, any specific places at this point where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table?
So you've heard me say that one of my favorite ways of looking at what's happening this year is by quoting an economist, Justin Fox, who said the following: uncertainty has never felt so uncertain. And that sort of captures how uncertain uncertainty is right now, because there are so many moving pieces. We haven't discussed Doge yet. We haven't discussed deregulation. We haven't discussed fiscal policy. There's a lot of moving pieces, both domestically and internationally. The Trump administration is trying to rewire both. They're trying to rewire the domestic economy, and they're trying to rewire the global economy. And rewirings are very tricky because you can't simply stop everything, shut everything down, rewire, and open it again. You've got to do it as activities continue. So investors have to expect volatility. I think that's the most important theme right now. They have to be ready to be as tactical as they can be.
Nightly Scroll with Haley Caronia.
I'm Haley Caronia. I scroll with the homies here in the live chat, and I love my long scrolls on my phone at night. The show is literally called Nightly Scroll. My screen time has reached astronomical levels, but I do it to get all of the videos and all of the content that you won't find anywhere else. I don't want to be surrounded by an echo chamber, so I hope you join me. Someone just said the show is great. Keep it up. Thank you. I will.
Nightly Scroll with Haley Caronia. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
Meaning that we're going to see massive swings. You have to have a stomach for volatility, and you have to protect your spending money. So money that you need for the next 3 to 6 months should be kept aside in short-dated treasuries and really high-quality investments, because the volatility in what's called the risk assets, in equities in particular, is going to remain. It's going to be a bit of a roller coaster.
So much more to talk about, all the more reason to invite you back on again, Mohammed, as soon as possible. Thank you very much for being so generous with your time this afternoon. And it was an honor to join the chorus of those congratulating you this past week for your most recent honor by GABA, the German American Business Association of Southern California. It was wonderful seeing you here and hope to see you again very soon. We'll be following you on social media in the meantime and your candidacy for Chancellor at Cambridge University. We wish you all the very best and look forward to speaking with you again very, very soon. Thank you very much for taking the call live with us here this afternoon.
My great pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you very much. That is the one and only Dr. Mohamed EL-ERIAN, live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues 790 KBC. Good afternoon. Big finish to the week on Wall Street and an impressive rebound following that Liberation Day market turmoil we saw over the last month or so. The Dow coming in for a closing gain today of 564 points, settling at 41,317. The S&P 500 of 82 at 5,687. The NASDAQ popped 267 at 17,978. And we did see the yield on the 10-year note, which has been bouncing around. Let's bring that one up here while we can. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, and that's one that the Federal Reserve will be watching next week when they have their big meeting. The yield on the 10-year now at 4.31%. The volatility index pulling back 8% today. Gold hovering at around 3,247 and change, down. Make that up 25.20 today, up 25.20 to 3,247.40 an ounce. Checking the cryptos now, big week for Bitcoin. In fact, we'll be speaking to Jason Nelson from Decrypt coming up here shortly to focus on the crypto action this week. Bitcoin hovering just below 97,000 now, 96,720, pulling back about $300 here at the moment. Ethereum at 1,838, and Doge is back to 18 cents. The Berkshire Hathaway shareholders meeting happening tomorrow with 94-year-old investment genius Warren Buffett presiding over the proceedings, and we see Berkshire Hathaway Class A stock, which happens to be the most expensive on the New York Stock Exchange, closing up more than $14,000 today at $809,808.50. Apple sliding nearly $8 at $205 and change. Amazon 22 cents lower to $189 and change. Netflix hitting a record high today, up more than $23 at $1,156 and change. And now the latest news on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Break out the champagne. Crypto getting close to, well, its recent highs. In fact, Bitcoin at the moment getting close to 100,000 once again after hitting a record high earlier this year. Let's see, Bitcoin at the moment is hovering at around 97,000. The other crypto names also getting a pop this week. We're also watching what's happening on spot ETFs being discussed for some of the crypto names, including Solana, XRP, and Doge. Spot ETFs likely to be approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission in coming months. That's the expectation by many crypto analysts. Action could come as soon as July 2nd, according to some reports. Also, we're watching what's happening with Strategy. That's the big player in the Bitcoin buying space with their guy, Michael Saylor, buying big in Bitcoin this year. Taking all this in now, let's get an update on what's happening with crypto. Jason Nelson joins us live now, reporter at decrypt.co. Jason, thank you very much for coming to the line this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we got Bitcoin here roaring back. Looks like the latest jobs report helped to perk up the mood among Bitcoin investors here, with Bitcoin right now hovering around 97,000. Give us your reaction to the latest moves here.
Well, it just goes to show you that Bitcoin, while it's volatile, sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. And we see a lot of people treating Bitcoin as a pretty much like a tech stock these days. But it's moves like this that shows that while the rest of the tech industry may be kind of flat, Bitcoin is still pretty much doing its own thing.
All right, and what about that correlation that's been noted or noticed between the NASDAQ and Bitcoin and other cryptos? Is that something that you're latching onto as well?
Right. Well, and that's kind of what I meant. What's happening is you have a lot of people coming into crypto, particularly Bitcoin, like you mentioned, strategy. They're trying to raise another 21 billion to buy more Bitcoin, and other companies are also building up their strategic reserves. So while you still have regular investing, it's interesting to point out that all of these companies are making this almost like a beeline for Bitcoin itself.
All right. What about Ethereum? It got hammered last month or so, but it too has come back now above 1,800 an ounce. So what about Ethereum here?
Yeah, Ethereum has rebound. It, like you said, it was down earlier this week, but I think it's primarily the overall enthusiasm. You mentioned the ETFs. People are seeing these broader moves and coming back in to think that maybe this might be their opportunity to see some gains as well.
All right. What about Doge and some of these meme coins? Anything that's caught your attention?
Well, meme coins are still popular, but I've spoken to analysts who think that the overall meme coin craze may be dying out. Mostly that's because of the celebrity meme coins, the few rug pull situations that have happened over the last few months. So while meme coins are still being generated every day, you're not seeing the same hype as you did a few months ago.
All right, and now we have some states considering strategic Bitcoin reserves, most notably Arizona. Republicans in the Arizona legislature sent its Democratic governor 2 bills that would establish strategic Bitcoin reserves. Other states are considering doing the same. It remains to be seen whether the Democratic governor of Arizona will sign this into law. That's Governor Katie Hobbs there. What's your view of how this is playing out here with the states looking to create their own strategic Bitcoin reserves?
Well, it doesn't surprise me considering the federal government has their own strategic Bitcoin reserve. So you have states looking to see if they can have some type of advantage to storing Bitcoin as well. It's still somewhat political as far as whether someone likes Bitcoin or doesn't like Bitcoin. For some reason, that's still a thing. You will see certain people on the Republican side be more pro-Bitcoin, especially now that the president and people in the top of the administration are pro-Bitcoin. And then on the other side, you'll see people who are negative because it's their side. So we have to stick with what our side believes.
All right. What about XRP? That's the one that faced a lot of scrutiny under the previous administration, but now getting more favorable treatment. And looks like the SEC, according to some reports, will make a decision on whether there'll be a flood of new crypto ETFs coming out here in July, possibly. What's the latest news on that?
Well, you have actually a lot of ETFs being applied for. One of the ETFs, there's a SUI ETF, which is another blockchain, and you just have these people filing for these applications, getting their exposure out. But the SEC isn't just rubber stamping all of these ETFs. Like you said, the July decision for both XRP and Dogecoin was pushed back. So they're not just greenlighting all of these ETFs. It's still a process that has to be looked at by the SEC.
All right. At this point, I'm going to ask you a tough question here. If you can get your crystal ball out, where do you see Bitcoin go from here? We'll be testing the all-time highs we saw earlier this year. Is that in the cards here with Bitcoin right now hovering just below 100K again?
Well, it's certainly possible. I don't break out my crystal ball. So, but there's a lot of enthusiasm right now in the industry and in the space. There's some bold predictions coming out again, which I don't really put much stock into them.
Actor Michael Rosenbaum. He knows some of the most talented people in the business.
Let's get inside of Jack Osbourne.
Bands would say Black Sabbath was a huge influence.
And thank God you liked it, boy.
Yeah.
Elijah Wood.
Peter gets on the phone. Elijah, would you like to play the role of Frodo?
Did you cry?
Probably screamed at the top of my lungs.
You play iconic characters, Black Canary and Black Siren. Who would you choose?
Probably Black Siren. She's like, I got this. And that's how Katie Cassidy feels. She's got this.
I like that.
The Inside of You podcast. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
But with Bitcoin regaining 97,000 in the last few days, it's likely it's going to try to test 100,000 soon.
Anything else that you'd like to mention? Anything on the horizon? We have the Milken Institute Global Conference here in Beverly Hills. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, will be there, interviewed by Michael Milken. And I'll be there, by the way, covering everything and being live on the air this whole week coming up. So we'll certainly have our antenna up for all things crypto. But anything on your radar screen in the week ahead?
The Bitcoin conference is coming up in Las Vegas. And also it just happened, Token 2049 just happened. And that was a major conference in Asia. So there's going to be, I think what happens at the Bitcoin conference may give us an idea of where things are going, considering the last time there was a Bitcoin conference, a candidate for the president of the United States spoke there, and now it could be anyone, and that's going to be a good sign, an indicator of where we're going.
All right, Jason. Well, thank you very much. Great to have you with us here. Jason Nelson, reporter at decrypt.co. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend, and thanks for joining us live here on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KABC. Los Angeles City Hall dealing with a budget crisis. In the meantime, it looks like large homeless encampments are being tackled now, especially in parts of Gardena and other areas of Los Angeles County. Let's get an update on all this now from the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former Los Angeles City Council member, former LAPD sergeant, current reserve officer with something like 56 years of service to the City of Angels. Dennis ZINE, thank you very much for coming to the line.
Thank you, Frank. Good afternoon on this wonderful Friday.
Yes, indeed. And stock market up and crypto's up, so people are feeling a little bit better heading into this weekend, Dennis ZINE, but certainly a lot of concerns as well. What about what's happening at City Hall? Any updates there on what's going on with the city budget?
Well, Frank, they're hearing from the different department representatives, and it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. They're going to have a lot of debates, a lot of public comments, a lot of back and forth. Ultimately, they're going to make some cuts. Now, whether those cuts are massive cuts or minor cuts, but for example, in the Los Angeles Police Department, which I'm extremely familiar with, whatever they cut in civilian capacity, many of those jobs will be backfilled by uniformed police officers. And looking at the numbers of uniformed officers, and I talk about uniformed officers, every sworn member from the chief of police down to the recruit in the academy, when they do that, you're going to have a field force that is reduced from the current strength, which means that when people are waiting for a unit to arrive, 911 calls, etc., there's going to be longer delays than there are now. It's going to be critical for the city to maintain public safety. So if the mayor says we're not going to cut police officers, but we are going to eliminate many civilian positions that are required by law to have those jobs fulfilled, it's going to be critical as far as crime control and apprehension of criminals, scientific investigation division, and many of the other entities that the police department has. In addition to that, you have the fleet, black and white vehicles, motorcycles, helicopters, etc. They need service. Fire department went through this situation where they didn't have mechanics and the rig sat waiting for someone to fix them. We're going to have the same problem. So whatever they cut back in the police department, we're currently at bare bones. It's going to have a dramatic effect. As far as the other departments, I honestly believe some can be consolidated. We talk about everything from the airport to the zoo. There's many departments from A to Z. You can consolidate. When you consolidate, you do away with a general manager, which is extremely expensive with salary, benefits, secretaries, etc. So there are a lot of changes that can be made if they have the will to do it. But I would say on this city council, you have a split city council, those that really don't care and those that want to realize the fact we're in a serious, serious economic situation with $1 billion. In addition to that, when you look at property tax is going to be wiped out in Pacific Palisades. You're not talking about $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 homes, you're talking about $1 million plus. So you're talking about a huge hit on the revenues. And I know that they're talking about a bond measure, which would be another tax to the homeowners, is to build fire stations. And then they want to do a sales tax to hire firefighters. So the people of Los Angeles need better wake up that this city council needs to come up with some realistic approaches and solutions. Otherwise, the people of LA are either going to be without resources and without the personnel to handle the problems, or going to face extremely high increases in taxes, not only the property tax, but sales tax. That's the forecast that I see.
On the air live with the Honorable Dennis ZINE, and crime and homelessness, certainly big issues facing businesses here. What about on the homeless front? We see some action now to clear out some of the large homeless encampments. What do you see happening on that front?
Well, that's a hit and miss. They get a lot of publicity. They clear them out. They have another one. They clear it out. It's like it's leapfrog. They leapfrog the situation. But when you look at the money that we've spent, billions upon billions upon billions of the homeless, we haven't solved the problems. If they have a 5% reduction, a 10% reduction, you still have an 85-90% homeless population in the city of Los Angeles throughout the neighborhoods. And when we have these departments that are supposed to handle that, and then the question is, what did you spend the money on? Well, we don't know. Then LASA has been dissolved, and now the federal government is coming in, the U.S. Attorney's Office, with the resources. What happened to all the money? You didn't solve the problem, but you did spend the money. There's a lot of questions to be asked, and I wouldn't be surprised if the federal government came in with some indictments to say, you know what, you spent the money, we can't find it, but you're responsible for it, so what's your answer? I don't have an answer. Well, we have an answer for you, and that's not a very pleasant answer. But I like the fact that the federal government's looking into this, because seriously, billions have been spent, and the impact has been negligible. If they talk about a 9 or a 10% reduction and you spend billions and billions of dollars, it really doesn't justify that expenditure. They're not doing what they need to do to solve the problem. And again, this isn't just in certain areas of the city. This has become a citywide problem with the homeless population. I feel for those homeless people, but they need to come up with better programs, and the programs that they have obviously haven't been working, but they've cost an excessive amount of money, and the taxpayers are footing that bill.
Retail theft still an issue. Looks like a retail theft involved a high-speed police chase today. You may have been covering that on Fox 11. You do a great job there on these chases. High-speed pursuit of a grand theft suspect ended in a deadly crash when the driver slammed into the back of a dump truck today on the 210 freeway in La Crescenta. Crazy things happening out there.
Absolutely. I was watching that live as it was occurring, and most of the local stations were covering that. It was a high-speed pursuit, started out of Ventura County. They had a number of CHP officers in pursuit, and I saw the crash. The individual crashed into that truck that was sitting there doing nothing wrong, and the units were Code 3 chasing this individual, crashed, and then all of a sudden the cameras backed off because the individual was ejected from the car. Obviously, he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and landed on the freeway, which obviously caused massive congestion on the freeway. But this individual passed away at the scene. As far as giving any kind of aid, I don't think there was any aid that could be given because of the severe injuries that were sustained in that crash.
The Honorable Dennis ZINE, thank you very much for coming to the line. Former LA City Council member, former LAPD Sergeant, current Reserve Officer. Godspeed to all of your colleagues at the LAPD. Dennis ZINE, thanks for joining us on the line. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. I'll be back with more at 4 and broadcasting live for the Milken Institute Global Conference next week here on 790 KBC.
No Contest Wrestling. O'Shea Jackson Jr. and TJ Jefferson with the biggest names in the game.
Give it up for the Dark Angel. First.
I can believe it.
NXT Double Champion. Welcome the King, Lexus King.
I don't know if I'd be where I'm at now if I didn't take the path that I took.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jada Parker.
What made you, after the soccer career, go WWE?
The answer I always have to that is like, why not?
The No Contest Wrestling Podcast, part of the Rich Eisen Podcast Network. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.